This video is sponsored by Apple Music Classical. What's up guys and welcome back to my channel. I'm Anik, I'm a classical pianist, and today we're going to have a deep dive into the story of Frédéric Chopin, one of the piano goats of the Romantic era. We'll have a look at how his music changed over the years, how his life and the world around him influenced his tunes, and how he flipped the script on piano playing. So, grab a snack, get comfy, and let's jam through Chopin's journey together. Geil, man. Alright, so Frédéric Chopin was born 1810 in Poland in a tiny village called Zelazowa Wola. I hope I kind of pronounced it correctly. To all the Polish people, I'm sorry for butchering the name. Let me know in the comments how to pronounce it correctly. And he was like the Wunderkind of Poland, the child prodigy, and everyone knew him. Most of his first compositions were deeply rooted in Polish forms, for example Polonaise or Mazurkas. Dude, he was only 7 when he composed this piece. I mean, 7. What did you do when you were 7? I honestly have to admit, even though I'm a huge Chopin lover and admirer and a fangirl, I have never heard this piece before, and many of his other early works as well. But of course I couldn't leave it like that, so I listened to a very special playlist on Apple Music Classical, which contains quite a long list of pieces that are less famous by Chopin. It's called Chopin Undiscovered, and there are many of these playlists with a lot of other composers as well. So for everyone who is interested to learn more about the evolution of different composers, I can totally recommend these playlists. So in this early Polonaise in G minor, you can already hear his fascination for the traditional Polish dance forms, just like in his Mazurkas, in which he's capturing the essence of Polish folk music with its distinctive rhythms and melodies. What you can also hear is that even as a child, he was already starting to play around with very expressive and lyrical melodies, which would become his trademark later. So Chopin's childhood and youth was marked with a very vibrant cultural environment in Warsaw, where he was exposed to both the high art of European music, but also the rich traditions of Polish folk. However, the political landscape was pretty unstable. Back then, Poland was under constant threat from its neighbors and struggling for independence. As Chopin grew older and older, he was celebrated as the rising star of Poland. And so when he was 20 years old, it was time for him to expand and share his art also outside of Poland. And this time he composed his first piano concerto, which by the way, is not really his first piano concerto. Here comes a little fun fact. Chopin wrote his second piano concerto actually first, but he published it after publishing the official first piano concerto now. Damn, that was complicated, but I hope you got it. My absolute favorite recording of this piano concerto is the one by Arthur Rubinstein, live with the New York Philharmonics. By the way, I'm also going to link all the music that I'm playing here in the description box, so you can go and listen to it on Apple Music Classical. But also let me know in the comments which piano concerto you like more, the first or the second, and also which recordings you love. So Chopin left Poland and went to Vienna to evolve his career outside of Poland in 1830, just shortly before the outbreak of the November uprising against the Russian Empire. Chopin immediately wanted to come back and serve for his homeland. However, his family, his father, pretty much the whole country actually, asked him to stay away and to carry their culture and their pride in his music. So Chopin traveled from Vienna to Paris, and in his whole life, he would never come back to Poland again. I don't know if I could do that. I mean, he was only 21 at that time. And I mean, okay, he didn't know that he would never return, and he did have a couple of attempts to go back, but he never managed to go back to his home. That must be crazy. So on his journey from Vienna to Paris, he stopped in Stuttgart, where I'm living. Woo! And actually here in Stuttgart, Chopin composed one of his most famous etudes after he heard about the defeat of the November uprising in Warsaw, the Revolutionary Etude. As you see, Chopin's etudes are not only extreme challenges in a technical way, but also they carry so much musical depth and emotion in them, which made them enter the Olymp of piano literature. Until now, Chopin's etudes count as some of the most difficult pieces ever written for piano. By the way, I'm like a huge fan of the Chopin Etudes, and I have studied all of them and recorded them in my very first album, which you can also listen to on Apple Music Classical. I'll put a link in the description box. So Chopin spent the rest of his life in exile, carrying a deep sense of longing and nostalgia for his homeland. This separation from Poland profoundly influenced his music, infusing it with a blend of melancholy and patriotism that resonates through many of his works. After moving to Paris, Chopin started to blend his Polish roots more with international styles. I mean, it's obvious that you're going to change things if you're changing environment, but also I was wondering why he never continued to write songs, because when he was younger and while he was still in Poland, he was writing lots of vocal pieces as well. His Polish songs were nice, and in the beginning people liked them because it was a little bit exotic, but after a while he discovered that, nobody really understands Polish in the rest of the world, so the audience was not really into it so much, and basically he had to change his way of composing more to fit the international taste, let's say. So this was the time when he started to experiment more with different forms and styles.
Słoneczkiem na niebie nie świeciłabym jak tylko dla ciebie, ani na wody, ani na lasy, ale przez wszystkie czasy pod twym okienkiem i tylko dla ciebie, gdybym słoneczko mogła zmienić siebie.
In Paris, Chopin was in the middle of a vibrant cultural scene, and he befriended many prominent figures in various fields, such as Franz Liszt, Berlioz, Victor Hugo, Mendelssohn, and also Georges Sand, his later love interest. At this time, the Nocturne became very popular and trendy, with the Irish composer John Field credited as one of its pioneers. Nocturnes are basically very lyrical and expressive pieces that are supposed to capture the mystery and the calmness of the night. So the Nocturnes by John Field laid the groundwork, but it was Frédéric Chopin who brought the Nocturne to its highest artistic expression. In total, Chopin composed 21 nocturnes, and each of them is a piece of art on its own. So I can totally recommend to listen to the full collection of nocturnes and also compare different interpretations of different musicians. That's something that I like to do when I'm studying a piece for a longer while and I just want to get some fresh inspiration. So I like to go on Apple Music Classical and just listen through all the different renditions of the same piece. Now you saw that Chopin was composing in many forms that already existed, like nocturnes, mazurka, polonaise, etudes, and many others. But what many people do not know is that he also invented, or kind of invented, a new form, at least for piano solo, which had a big impact on the music scene. Now, as I said, it was not new, but it was at least new enough. The ballades as an instrumental piece. These are not the typical vocal ballades, which have already existed before. These are ballades without words, which is, by the way, the original title that Chopin gave these pieces. But nowadays, everyone is just calling them ballades. These pieces are telling a story without using one single word. Since this form didn't exist before, Chopin was very free in the way that he composed these ballades. Unfortunately, I won't be able to go through each and every piece that Chopin composed, but if you are interested to learn more about Chopin's compositions, you should definitely check out the work pages on Apple Music Classical, where you'll find little introductions to many of the compositions of a lot of different composers, but in this case of Chopin, which I think is always very insightful because you're listening and simultaneously reading a little bit about it. Okay, let's talk about love. Chopin's relationship with the writer Georges Sand was a major part of his life. Their time together brought out a lot of his emotional and introspective side in his music. Now, since Chopin had some severe health issues, the couple decided to go to Mallorca, hoping for the good weather to help his health conditions. However, they were pretty unlucky because it was very rainy and cold in Mallorca through their whole stay, which just made it worse. But in Mallorca, Chopin was very productive and he wrote his preludes there. One of his most famous ones is the Raindrop Prelude. way, since we're talking about Paris, I'm also coming to Paris. On November 23rd, I'm going to perform all the Chopin Etudes at the Salle Cortot in Paris, which is such a big honor because Alfred Cortot was one of the OGs when it came to interpreting Chopin's works. You will find tickets and information also in the link in the description box. I'm also going to play in Würzburg on the 6th of December with a little Christmas special. And also I'm very excited to come to London in January. The ticket sale just started now, so be quick and grab your tickets here. Okay, now back to Chopin. Or actually, back to Beethoven. After Beethoven, the sonata was kind of dead because nobody dared to write something and put the title sonata on top of it. I mean, I can totally understand Beethoven was the absolute goat of composing sonatas. So as soon as you would have dared to compose something in this direction, people would immediately compare you to Beethoven, and most probably you would lose. But after some time, the music style evolved more and more into what we call romantic style nowadays. So with a little bit of distance, composers started to write sonatas again. Also, Chopin. His second sonata, Opus 35 in B-flat minor, is one of my absolute favorite pieces by Frédéric Chopin. And the third movement of the sonata is the Funeral March, which is super famous. I'm pretty sure that everyone has heard this before. Actually, when I was just a kid, I heard the middle section of this Funeral March. It immediately became my favorite piece. I always wanted to listen to it. The only problem was that I just didn't know to which piece it belongs. Back then, I was binge watching a DVD by Evgeny Kissin, and in the start menu, there was this middle part being played as a background music, and I completely fell in love with it. And I remember that sometimes I was just turning on the TV to just have the menu there and listening to the music. For many years, I actually didn't know to which piece this belonged until my mom accidentally just bumped into a recording by Arthur Rubinstein where he was playing the second sonata, and she was like, oh, I found it. And from that point, there was nothing that I wanted more than playing this sonata by Chopin. Luckily, nowadays it's much easier to find the music that you're searching for, especially when it comes to classical music. If the 8-year-old me had Shazam and Apple Music Classical, I could have probably discovered so much more without years of waiting and searching. Now, this sonata is very special in many different ways, but the last movement, the fourth movement of the sonata, was so much out of the world that Chopin received lots of criticism for it. Robert Schumann was actually one of his biggest admirers, and when he first heard Chopin's playing, he said, "Chapeau, a genius." But when Schumann heard the last movement of the sonata, he actually said, "This is not music." And he didn't mean it in a positive way. I do think that it was very brave and modern what he did there. And nowadays I couldn't really imagine anything else as the final movement of that sonata. But what about you? What do you think about that last movement? Let me know in the comments. As Chopin's health declined, his music reflected more and more the deeper and melancholic mood. In his last years, Chopin returned to Polish musical forms, but with a more refined and mature approach. You can compare his early mazurkas to his later mazurkas, or his early polonaise to his later polonaise, and you will see that so much has changed, and he's capturing all the journey and experiences in his life in his later works. Critics had mixed feelings about Chopin's music. Berlioz admired Chopin's ability to evoke emotions without clear reasons, highlighting the unique, almost mystical quality of his music. However, Ludwig Rellstab, a German critic, was less impressed. Always the Germans. He criticized some of Chopin's harmonic choices as too unusual and found his music overly complex, lacking the straightforward appeal he valued. Nowadays, I would see it very different, but I also think that it's very interesting to see how people reacted to the music back then. Nevertheless, Chopin had a huge impact on piano playing until now. He brought out new colors and emotions from the instrument in a way that no other composer was able to do. And his music still resonates with us today, which just shows that great music is timeless. In 1849, Chopin died in Paris at the age of only 39 from tuberculosis. And his final wish, which I think is so romantic, was for his body to be buried in Paris, but for his heart to be returned to Warsaw, where it actually remains until today, encased in one of the pillars in Warsaw's Holy Cross Church. When I studied in Warsaw, I would go there and just sit next to it. It was a very special place to me. It really felt holy to me. I don't know how to say it. So in case you want to visit Warsaw and you're a big Chopin fan like me, you definitely have to go to this church and say hi. If you enjoyed this little story time of Chopin's life and work, I am sure you will also love the podcast on Apple Music Classical of The Story of Classical. I have already listened to most of it, and I especially love to listen to it when I'm driving around. Right now I'm somewhere in the middle of the early 20th century, and I can totally recommend the whole series. You know, classical music music is such a huge world, and the chances that you're going to discover something new are extremely high. So have fun discovering classical music on your own with Apple Music Classical. You'll find a link in the description box. And that's a wrap on our chat about Chopin. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments what your favorite Chopin piece is. To everyone that wants to support the channel and wants to see more content like this in the future, please check out the Patreon, also a link in the description box. See you in the next videos and keep enjoying the world of classical music. Bye.